entering the Mayo experience.
Mayo experience. Mayo experience. Mayo experience. Experience.
Welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience. We've 12 waiver wire pickup power rankings, the injury report, running back snaps, and a preview of Monday Night Football from a betting and DraftKings Showdown perspective. Sal Vetri will be joining me here in just a moment, but I do want to let you know we got some winners of the 20 DK bucks and ways that you can get into the draw for 20 DK dollars on the show. Two ways to do so this week. Smash the like button for the episode. The harder you hit smash, the better chance you have of winning the 20 DK dollars. Not really, but you might need to use that 20 DK dollars withdrawing it to buy a new screen if you do smash it too hard. Either way, hit the like button. Leave your DraftKings handle in the comment section, not the live chat, the comment section, and tell me your favorite pickup defense for weeks 14, 15, and 16. If you're planning on making the playoffs in your season-long league, this is stuff you need to start looking for right now. I've started to scout out ahead just a little bit, and I'll be discussing this with Jake Seeley on Tuesday's live show, 2:15 p.m. Eastern Time on the DraftKings YouTube channel. We'll be taking all your questions as it pertains to trade deadline stuff as well, so we'll re-up on the waiver wire in case new news breaks. We're going to go over the rankings for the weekend, then we're going to dedicate a portion of the show to answering your trade questions. So if you got them, bring them tomorrow, 2 p.m. Eastern, 2:15 p.m. Eastern Time on the DraftKings YouTube channel. So get those in. Set yourself a reminder right now. All right? The other ways to do so, to get into the draw for 20 DK bucks, you got to subscribe to the Pat Mayo Experience audio podcast. Download those episodes that appear up there. Then leave a 5-star review, DraftKings handle, something you like about the show. And you too will be in that draw for 20 DK bucks. If you're looking for the list of running back snaps or the rankings of the pickups and full injury report, you can find that up on dkplaybook.com or merely hit the description or comment section of this video and podcast, and you can find the links directly to get those things right now. The Pat Mayo Experience Listeners League will be posted once I receive the link. I do not have it yet, and I'll add that to the description of all the videos and all the podcasts once they go up. I think that's the housekeeping we need to do besides saying off the winners here. Let me pull up the winners for Week 11 of 20 DK dollars. We're looking at Damn Yankee, Dells Squad 1, Waldo 2016, C Marsh 1123, B Patterson 40, JSL. Nice, quick, easy, to the point. I like that. Joshua C5 and Day Call Meskin are all the winners of 20 DK dollars. I've sent in the winners. Hopefully you are credited by the end of the day, maybe into tomorrow. Either way, it all works out. Sal Vetri from the Sal Vetri YouTube channel and myriad other places on the line right now. What is going on, my man?
What's up, Pat? How was your weekend? How'd you do this weekend?
I had a much better weekend in DraftKings golf and betting golf, although the bets for football weren't all so bad. DraftKings, not great. It turns out that this was the week that, you know, all those people, they're like, fade the chalk, fade the chalk, fade the chalk. I mean, a lot of times people are chalky for a reason, at high ownership for a reason on DraftKings, but like 2 or 3 times a year, it goes completely the other way. So it doesn't work out every week, but if you are one of these contrarian players, Week 11 was your week.
Yeah, Week 11 was your week. Brian Hill at the top of that. Ended up personally with no Brian Hill, but it doesn't help when all of the pivots to Brian Hill, like Miles Sanders and whoever else you might have gotten to, do absolutely nothing. So, yeah, I was feeling real good going into the 4 o'clock games with Miles Sanders yet to play, no Brian Hill, and then seeing Miles Sanders touch the ball 4 times in the second half was pretty tilting as a chalky Deebo Samuel started to go off around 5:30 p.m. yesterday.
Yeah, I also didn't end up with Brian Hill. That was one of the big things that we spelled out on the DraftKings show last week with Vlad. And on the Friday re-up was like, what do we really know about Brian Hill? And I think the key point was, let's say Devonta Freeman had been active for this game. And Brian Hill was, what, $4,800? I think that's what he was?
Yep.
Yeah, so if Devonta Freeman was like $5,500 on this slate, would you have been lining up at a 30% clip to play Devonta Freeman? And the answer was no, he wasn't. So why would you love Brian Hill?
Yeah, the answer was overwhelmingly no. And Devonta Freeman was like $5,100, $5,000 the previous weeks before. And yeah, exactly. If that guy's name was Devonta Freeman, nobody would bat an eye. It's just that people thought it was a shiny new toy, but it was already priced up as a 6-point road underdog. And honestly, he got the best possible spot to be in, getting up early, and he just ended up diving right into the offensive line for 1 yard or 2 yards every single carry. So yeah, that chalk fell apart, but it seemed like almost all the chalk did. So it was a really big contrarian week. I think a lot of casuals did well.
Well, it also works out too. Like you could still have sustained a lot of success, even having Brian Hill and his 4.8 DraftKings points into your lineup, because so many people ended up with him. And like you mentioned, the pivots off of him, it was just a completely. It's not that you needed to pivot off of him onto someone else in his range who was better, because realistically, like Carlos Hyde was the only one who really came through, I suppose, that people were going to. The move was just you have to build your teams differently. You pay up for two. It was a week to have a wide receiver in the flex, put it that way.
Yeah, wide receiver in the flex. And yeah, you hit on it perfectly. There was just nothing in that 4K range that really stood out. A Carlos Hyde garbage time touchdown. The Millie Maker, let me have it. I have it here. The Millie Maker lineup had an 8.9 fantasy point day out of Devin Singletary being in the winning lineup. So that just tells you that you really didn't need a ton of running backs. Not a lot went off.
Yeah, what was his ownership in the Millie Maker, Devin Singletary?
His ownership was 12.3. I saw across the industry it was like 10% owned for the week, which I thought was surprising. But yeah, 12.3%.
Yeah, it came in low. I think a lot of people got off of him as the week went along because they started talking themselves into the proper narrative that Bills running backs just aren't good at fantasy. They want to run the ball a lot, but once they get in close, it could be Frank Gore who takes these, or exactly what happened again yesterday. Josh Allen just rushes it himself. Like Josh Allen and John Brown. And I guess when we get to the Pat Mayo experience winner of the week, Dawson Knox was another guy that you could have played on the Bills. But the running backs, unless they're priced significantly down, I think Singletary will be a good play to end up going to eventually, because if he's going to score, it's going to be from deep and he's going to have a really big day. But a chalky Devin Singletary is never really a good thing, as it turns out.
Yeah, I agree. And last week, the price point up to 6K, and you still had Frank Gore luring around. And then also, I think Tevin Coleman was 6,100 last week, so that probably pulled some ownership off of it. But yeah, the price point for what the usage was for him was just not there.
Yeah, just even looking at it right now, like if you were going to pay up, that was the move at running back. If you actually wanted to generate some points whatsoever, or I guess you could have paid down for like Kalen Ballage, because he did score a touchdown, had a few catches, ended up with like 13 points at $4,000. So that didn't turn out to be all that bad, despite the fact that he had like the worst game of all time. Sometimes fantasy and reality, they separate a little bit, but the highest scoring running backs on the slate were McCaffrey by 10 points over that awful Mark Ingram, who of course couldn't do anything on the ground because he's terrible. So they just threw him a pass with no one around him twice, and he ends up getting into the end zone. He almost fumbled one without anyone hitting him, too. Classic Mark Ingram stuff. But he was 2. Kamara was number 3, and Elliott was number 4 on the main slate on DraftKings. Like, you had to spend if you're going to go up. And then, here's the lineup in the Pat Mayo Experience Open. So the winner of the $5,000 last week was CWM125. Congratulations to him. Or her, I have no idea. Josh Allen was the quarterback. Kalen Ballage and Brian Hill were the 2 running backs. So just punt running back was essentially the play, and then pay up for John Brown, Devontae Parker, Michael Thomas, and DJ Chark. Those were the 3 receivers in the flex. 49ers D, Dawson Knox, a 1.1% Dawson Knox at tight end, and boom, you win yourself $5,000.
Yeah, well, Pat, I pulled up the exact same lineup, that guy's lineup in the Millie Maker. He won $500 in the Millie Maker. Still nice, but just goes to show you how much lineup or not even lineup construction, game selection really matters, context selection. So yeah, it was an interesting week where a lot of the quarterbacks did well. There was like 8 quarterbacks to go for more than 25 points. A handful went for over 30. So it just came down to building your lineups differently, not relying on the 4K running back range where it all pretty much fell apart.
So I think you really hit on a key thing here, the tournament selection process, because I had a really nice week in golf. I know maybe football viewers don't know anything about golf, but I played one lineup in the $100 where there was, I think, 247 players. And I played 20 lineups in the $8 where there's like 70,000 people in it. So my best lineup I actually put in the $100, actually my second best lineup. It won $40 in the $8 and it won $700 in the $100 because it ended up coming like 13th. But it just goes to show you sometimes, even if you're playing 20 lineups into the $3 and spending the $60. Like the best tournament that I had on DraftKings, I put one lineup into the $40 where it's the min cash. Where if you just min cash, you get double your money. And like that tournament's actually structured really well. That's one that people I think should be looking at every single week.
Yeah, exactly. Like that's the biggest thing. If you play in these bigger fields like the Millie Maker, your upside is winning $1 million. But pretty much if you're not finishing in like the top 3, you could find a better contest selection and just your payout structure better everywhere else. That's actually pretty crazy that this guy finished outside the top 85 and 10x'd in the Pat Mayo Open compared to the Millie Maker, which I mean, it makes sense, but just seeing it in front of us is pretty wild.
Yeah, when you're playing against 3,000 people and it's a no rake contest and you can have it's a 3 max entry versus playing against 150,000 people, you don't need to be as sharp. That's kind of the whole thing. If you want to invest a little bit more, and that really depends on what your bankroll is, you're just better off playing slightly higher stakes and smaller tournaments to actually get return on your money.
Yeah, exactly. I think just contest size with the smaller fields is like the biggest thing. Usually you have to pay a lot more for it. But if you're in sort of these things, whether it's PGA or NFL, if you wait like an hour before lock, a lot of smaller fields will open up where there is a couple $1,000s to first and you only have to pay $5 to $10 to get in. They're usually not there early in the week, but that's just sort of a tip. Like an hour before lock, a lot of those more beneficial contests will open up.
Let's talk about some of the running back snap shares from the week. There was only 10 running backs who played more than 70% of their team's snap shares on Sunday, or just in week 11, not necessarily on Sunday, because Nick Chubb is on this list. So Christian McCaffrey led the way with 93% of the snaps. That was the most. I misspelled Elliott in this tweet, but Zeke was at 89%. Kenyon Drake, 88% over David Johnson, with Arizona going on to bye week. Miles Sanders, 85%. Dalvin Cook, 81%. Despite watching that game and feeling like Dalvin Cook was never on the field, and apparently he played 81% of the snaps. It was just an odd game from him. Kalen Ballage, 77%. Todd Gurley, 75%. Devin Singletary, 74%. Nick Chubb, 72% of the snaps. Leonard Fournette is mixed in there as well, wherever the hell he ended up going. 71% of the snaps for Leonard Fournette on the week. Does anything really stand out to you? Are you shocked at that Drake 88% over DJ, who played 13%? And coming on to bye week with Chase Edmonds potentially returning, coming off the bye, where do you think this backfield shakes down?
Yeah, so a little bit shocked, but once we got like right before the lock that he was going to get the lion's share of the touches, still shocked that you see no touches at all for David Johnson. So yeah, 88%. If I saw 70, I'd say, okay, maybe I'm not surprised, but 88% is a huge number just for a backfield touch share. So I think that's surprising. You didn't see any touches for David Johnson. With the bye week coming, we'll get more news on David Johnson, whether he just doesn't want to play or there's actually some sort of injury there. And yeah, with Edmonds coming back, it just makes it a messy situation. But I think Kenyon Drake's the guy who stands above all. They've already given him, it seems, the job over David Johnson. So I don't see why they're not going to give him the job over Chase Edmonds, who had a fine game when he was healthy, but now dealing with injuries. And Kenyon Drake has looked pretty solid in a couple of weeks now with the Cardinals. So yeah, I think Kenyon Drake is the guy that I would definitely want to have here. And I think there is some upside for him to see a 15 plus touch game moving forward, even if Edmonds comes back.
So if they go on to bye week and David Johnson gets himself right and he becomes healthy again, what % chance would you put at him reclaiming this job?
If he's, that's the thing. Like, I don't know if this guy is just not healthy or if he just doesn't care. Cause I mean, he didn't retweak any sort of injury after the last time we saw him, which looked like he was walking on some of these carries that he had in slight jogging. So if it comes out that he was injured and he is going to be 100% healthy, I mean, regaining the job as a 80% carry type of guy, I'd say it's like a 25% chance, 20% chance at this point. It doesn't seem like there's any upside in me really even wanting to start, let alone own him at this point, but you probably just don't have better options on your waiver wire and nobody wants to trade for him, so you're stuck with him.
Yeah, and that's a problem because I think he scored 148 fantasy points before that Giants game, and he scored 2 since.
Yeah, not good at all.
No, and you can have him in your fantasy league, and I'll talk about this with Sealy tomorrow. Again, 2:15 p.m. Eastern Time Tuesday on the DraftKings YouTube channel. We'll have our trade deadline special, so if you got trade questions, you should probably get in the live chat on Tuesday, so Sealy and I can go back and forth and try to answer those for you. But, like, would you even try to trade for him? Because I don't know if I would want that on my team, despite the fact that you could probably get him for nothing. This is usually the best time to buy anyone, but I legit have no idea what's going to happen.
Yeah, I have no idea what's going to happen. And I'll always try and make a trade, but like, what's the trade here? Like Devontae Parker for David Johnson? I can't see a David Johnson owner even wanting to do that at this point. So it just seems like maybe if somebody dumps him, obviously pick him up at that point if you have room. But it seems like not the spot. There's always upside if there is an injury, and like 2 weeks removed, something can completely change. We were calling out Damian Williams for having no shot, and then he has a fantastic week and maybe some upside moving forward. So there's always kind of the unpredictability of it, like you said. So I'll try and trade for this sort of a guy. But yeah, like Devontae Parker is a type of trade piece, and it just doesn't seem like you're going to get to an understanding and a deal with somebody in your league on that.
I have some questions about a week 11 for you. Ready?
Yeah.
Are you worried about the Patriots offense, or was the Eagles defense coming off of a bye week, almost like Atlanta was a few weeks ago? Not necessarily like great now, but fixed itself a little bit.
Yeah, I think I'm a little bit worried about this offense. I mean, you see Julian Edelman, throwing like the only touchdown of the game for the Patriots. And this was actually you touched on the Eagles defense getting better. Since they got Jalen Mills back about 3 or 4 weeks ago, the secondary has improved. Maddox has gotten healthier. Ronald Darby got healthier. So the secondary is very much improved. And you saw that last night. And I think the only reason they win the game is because there's just nobody on the Eagles offense out of pass catchers to just move the ball. And when they were dropping the ball like Aguilar a couple times late in that game. So I'm a little bit worried about this offense. Maybe tomorrow they say that there's a big announcement from Rob Gronkowski. They might get their blocking tight end back this year, so that might help. But no, yeah, I'm a little bit worried about this offense. They have a lot of moving pieces. We'll see what happens with Dorsett. N'Keal Harry came back last week, was somewhat active as like the wide receiver 4 once Dorsett went down. So maybe there's some upside there, but yeah, it just seems like there's not a ton of playmakers. They're dealing with some injuries. And again, the 3 or 4 headed backfield that they're running out there, it seems like if anything is hurting their upside in some of these situations.
Yeah, it just strikes me as there's almost no one besides Julian Edelman at the moment that you can feel good about plugging into your lineup.
Yeah, exactly. And I think all season long, we've kind of been saying this on this show even too, that they're just getting ahead and they're relying on scoring from their defense. And exactly in this game, once again, they relied heavily on that secondary and a little bit of the pass rush. And I think this was the team. I remember earlier in the year on this show, we were talking about how can you beat the Patriots? And we've seen one team in the Ravens do that. You have to have a good quarterback and a pass rush. And that's what they got last night in Carson Wentz. He just had no weapons to throw to. So it seems like a pretty stable recipe to beat them. They just had J.J. Arcega-Whiteside and Matt Collins out there, so it's pretty easy to shut them down if you're the Patriots secondary.
The Denver backfield, before the Vikings game, Vic Fangio came out and said that Phillip Lindsay would see the bulk of the carries, and when we look at actual snap distribution, that's exactly how it played out. Lindsay played 64% of the snaps, Royce Freeman played 30% of the snaps, Devontae Booker played 16% of the snaps. Do you think this is a major adjustment that can sustain itself moving forward for the rest of the year? Because if so, it does seem like Phillip Lindsay could be a league winner for you, and maybe now, like with the trade deadline coming up, maybe he is someone to target. That if you looked at like rest of the season rankings or just the overall sentiment on Phillip Lindsay, I would gauge it's pretty indifferent. Like if we had to re-rank everyone, he'd probably just come out like running back number 20. But if he's going to play 65% of the snaps, and that can be consistent week after week after week, I know that this week against Buffalo is not a fantastic matchup, but you can gash the Bills up the middle if they decide to go that route. That Lindsay could be a nice trade target, or do you think this could just flip back next week with the whim of a hat?
So I definitely think it could flip back. We've seen this a couple of times, but we've never had the head coach come out behind them and say, this is the way we want it to happen. It just kind of happened based on game flow. You've seen Freeman play 60% of the snaps, I believe, 2 weeks this season. But yeah, I think that the upside, at least with the information we have right now, is that there's a better situation for Phillip Lindsay. And I think a lot of people in just season-long leagues might not react to that quick enough. So go ahead and try and get him, because again, 2 weeks from now, this might not matter, but right now the edge is in getting him, because he's probably going to be undervalued based on what his role seems like it's going to be. This past weekend, he had 18 total touches. That was double the amount that Royce Freeman had. You talked on it. He had double the amount of snaps as well, so it kind of correlates there. Yeah, I like going out and getting Phillip Lindsay. Just peeking ahead to DraftKings, he's his 6 weeks. This is his lowest price in 6 weeks over there, so it seems like a nice spot overall. Upcoming, again, the Bills, you can run on them, but just moving forward overall, I think it's a spot where you get a guy for probably cheaper than he's actually, or being undervalued a lot more in leagues, and you can get him for cheaper than he deserves to be.
And realistically, they only have one tough matchup to close the season until week 17. We're not even including week 17 here, and that's against the Raiders, who have a pretty stout run defense. But the Texans week 14 is really the last true tough test. We saw, I guess that's Lamar Jackson, and that's a bit of a different running game. But you go Bills, Chargers, Texans, Chiefs, Lions to end the year. The one issue is if Brandon Allen continues to play quarterback and they don't switch over to Drew Lock once he's healthy at some point, is Brandon Allen seems very unwilling to check down. 2 targets for Phillip Lindsay, 1 target for Royce Freeman. Like, that's not going to cut it in a full point PPR. And even in a standard, solely because this is a team that's going to be playing from behind or playing close games. Yes, the carries will be there. They do want to run the ball, but that just hurts your overall touch upside in general and the upside of scoring fantasy points. So I would like to see that number go up. I just don't know if it will.
Yeah, I'd like to see it go up as well. I think the other note that spinning it a little bit to make it a little more positive is that you can say that Brandon Allen's actually keeping these drives alive better than Flacco has, and also getting Tim Patrick back last week on the outside. He looked productive, saw 8 targets, 4 catches, 77 yards. They've really needed a wide receiver too since Sanders went out. So if you're just seeing this as they can keep drives alive, get closer to the red zone, and just more overall touches per drive for Lindsey, maybe not in the receiving department, but if you're getting more carries overall, it can kind of balance itself out there. Again, this can all go to crap if Brandon Allen just starts to become much worse. He's been sustainable at best so far.
With the emergence and return of Kareem Hunt, it hasn't actually taken any volume away from Nick Chubb for the moment. Chubb played 72% of the snaps Thursday night against the Steelers. Hunt played 55%. Now, if the Browns get down a bunch in a game, you might see more Hunt on the field as he sort of morphed into the pass-catching back. Dontrell Hilliard has just been thrown aside in this situation. And they are playing sets with both of them on the field at the same time. But is Nick Chubb basically Derrick Henry now?
Yeah, that's interesting that you say that, because I was looking at that. He's just had no passing volume with Kareem Hunt back there. They're playing on the field at the same time, and Hunt's always going to be the priority, at least through 2 weeks. That's what it seems. And I mean, his versatility and his skill set match more of a passing game. So I don't know if it's to the same extent of Derrick Henry. I think Henry can definitely catch the ball, but the way that they just want to run that offense is just only run the ball. I think that at least the Browns want to throw the ball to the running back. It just seems that it's Kareem Hunt right now, but there'll definitely be opportunities when Hunt's not on the field the other 50% of the time, and there's going to be opportunities for Chubb to catch the ball. So I think it's a level above Derrick Henry. But I think that's a really good point that, yeah, the passing volume that was supposed to be there all season long and really was underwhelming from what we were told in the preseason, now it just seems like it's going to go all the way away. But at least he's on the field a ton still, and nothing's going into his goal line work, although he's getting like 12 carries a game, it seems, from the 1-yard line and not getting in. But yeah, I think that there's a big hit here for his overall ceiling. And this, I mean, at the beginning of the year, this was one of at least my knocks on him. Come the postseason for fantasy playoffs, you're going to have Hunt back. What does that look like for his workload? And it seems like it's going to just kill his passing game role.
The Atlanta Falcons, through 8 weeks, had a 2.7% sack rate on defense. The past 3 weeks since coming out of the bye, they have a 10.3% sack rate on defense. Is this a defense? I mean, when we get to the waiver wire pickups, Atlanta is going to be very high on that list. Is this a defense that we should really be targeting at this point? I know they have some tougher matchups. They play the Saints next week on Thanksgiving. Then they go to like a mini bye once again, but they get Tampa this week. That's a fantastic matchup. Should we be prioritizing Atlanta right now, knowing that their back end of the defense isn't so great, but they can score a lot of points that will continue to generate a lot of passing attempts against?
Yeah, this is an interesting spot that I'm waiting on some of like the Pro Football Focus data and things like that, DVOA, to look at what's really happening here. I'm still not sold on it just from a whole season of not having it. But coming off the bye, maybe you adjust, realize that your coach is on the hot seat. That's what I thought the Saints game was. But then you see it yet again. But if we factor in that Kyle Allen was the quarterback they were playing, holds onto the ball in some of the bottom parts of the league, bottom third of the league in terms of how long he holds onto the ball. So that'll lead to more sacks. Also, Atlanta had a punt return for a touchdown. So when you have a special teams or defensive score, you can just pressure more. So I haven't looked at the exact numbers. Obviously, there's been improvement since the bye week, but I want to see if they're just in these early positive game scripts and then they're just pressuring the heck out of the quarterback. Last week, Kyle Allen, and you have upside there. So I think it's interesting. Right now, I'm not totally sold on it, but if something shows up in the data that just in general, some injuries, players getting back, more pressure rates, or they're just running different packages, then there's something to it. If it's just 2-game sample of weird game flows because of a punt return, things like that, then I'm not going to be totally sold on it. And that's where I lean right now.
Weeks 14, 15, 16, the Falcons get at home against the Panthers. So we saw what they could do one time around on the road, at the 49ers, and then at home against the Jags. It's not a terrible schedule for a fantasy defense.
Yeah, it's not at all. And I know Nick Foles, it was his first game back, and it was not a great spot to return in. But if that's your fantasy championship, at least what you've seen so far is that's a pretty dang good matchup against this Jacksonville offense. Yeah,
so I'm just kind of perusing through it right now. Week 16, I guess if the Steelers are still out there, I know they got banged up on Thursday night against the Browns, but regardless, they get at Arizona, they get at home against Buffalo, and they get at the Jets in the fantasy playoffs. That's pretty good if you're going to look at it. Yeah. Kansas City as well gets, let's see here, at home against Denver week 15, at Chicago in week 16. That could be an under the radar one because people just know the Chiefs defense isn't great, but against those two teams, they could be pretty good.
Yeah, I agree. And another note on the Steelers is we've seen what Ryan Finley has done. He had like a 3.8 yards per attempt this past week. Just one of the worst you'll see. But now they get Ryan Finley next week, and that's the Steelers defense. It's going to be one of the best spots for a defense overall. I'm not totally opposed to I mean, if your trade deadline or you don't have one, just going out there and trying to throw in Steelers defense into some sort of package deal and throwing it in as sort of a nibble effect, the last player in there, because they have a really good playoff schedule, but they also have the Bengals next week, which can be easily a double-digit scoring week against that offensive line and Ryan Finley.
Alexander Mattison as a backup. He's been atop the handcuff rankings for most of the season, with the thinking being if Dalvin Cook goes down. We've seen the role that Dalvin Cook plays. Mattison has looked very good in limited opportunities backing him up. The problem is when they got down in this game, we started to see a lot more Amir Abdullah on the field as they treat him as a much better pass catcher. Now, he did put the ball on the ground, and that might impact his snaps going forward. But just looking at it for the moment, you have Cook at 81% from yesterday, Amir Abdullah 13%, Alexander Mattison 6%. So if Dalvin Cook was to go down, I do think that he would get the majority of the work, but I don't know anymore if it would be like a 75%, 80%. This could be a split depending on the situation. I don't know if they consider him a 3-down back. Would that worry you in the handcuff department?
Yeah, it would definitely worry me and be a little bit of a notch down, but it just depends on the matchup for them. So looking ahead in their schedule, if it was to happen anytime soon, they get on the road against the Seahawks, which I don't think would happen by then unless it happens in that game. But that's a difficult spot. He could get game flowed out. But then at home against the Lions, it doesn't seem like Stafford's going to play. I don't think they get down big in that one. So pretty much if they're going to be down in some of these games, Amir Abdullah is definitely coming on the field. And in the fantasy playoffs, you're going to have the Lions, you're going to have the Chargers on the road, and then the Packers at home for the Vikings. So it seems like a lot of neutral game scripts. So just looking at it from that situation, I don't think it worries me too much. I would project him to see like 70% of the snaps, 65%, somewhere around there in most of those games if Cook went down. But there's definitely not the same versatility as a 3-down back like you probably get at a guy like Wayne Gallman if Saquon was to continue to be banged up or go down.
Last thing, what do you do with Cooper Kupp?
Yeah, and I know Cooper Kupp once again last night, very odd. Jared Goff, it wasn't even odd. They just ran 50 offensive plays. Jared Goff throws 18 times. So a lot of this is not Kupp's fault. There's been 2 really just terrible games when Jared Goff goes on the road. And last night they don't have to throw, play limited snaps, slow paced game. You just have to hold on to him at this point. If you don't have a trade deadline, maybe try and ship him away. But it doesn't seem like Brandon Cooks is coming back anytime soon. So I think it's just a couple of game flow situations and then just the league adjusting to Kupp in the slot a little bit, having more tape on him there now 2 years in. So I think you hold on to him if you can get a pretty good deal of it, but I wouldn't be selling anywhere near low on Cooper Kupp in this offense. I think it's still completely fine. Robert Woods should be back from a personal issue. So I hold on to Cooper Kupp going into the playoffs unless you do get a beneficial deal, but don't try and sell low on him.
Do we know what happened with Robert Woods? Because I still haven't seen anything come out besides the fact that it was a personal matter. They didn't release what that was, but I don't know if this is something that by the time next week rolls around, he's going to be back on the field, or if this is something that could last multiple weeks.
Yeah, so I don't even want to speculate. I don't know. I tried to look right before the show for about 5 minutes, but I didn't see anything on Twitter. It was just, everything that popped up was personal issues. So I don't know if the team released a statement or anything on it.
All right, well, hopefully everything's good with Robert Woods. The problem now becomes you have, as Davis calls him, the good Mike Thomas, but he had to change his name from Michael Thomas to Mike Thomas, so he wouldn't be confused with the actual good, best receiver in fantasy, Michael Thomas. Josh Reynolds, Gerald Everett, and Cooper Kupp. Is this one of these scenarios where we've seen this from time to time, like the Randall Cobb situation? Once Jordy Nelson went away in Green Bay, it's like, oh my God, Randall Cobb is going to get all the targets. This is fantastic news. And he was absolutely terrible. He was just made to be a slot guy around the presence of better receivers. I don't want to take anything away from the ability of Cooper Kupp. And obviously the offensive line play, Jared Goff's play has been so horrendous that just getting him the ball it's been a hassle, put it that way. But is he just worse without Cooks and Woods around now that teams can actually focus on him?
Yeah, I think just naturally that happens. Like, he's still a more downfield, more than your traditional slot receiver. He'll go downfield more. He draws some of the best separation in the league. But yeah, you touched on it. When you have no Brandon Cooks and he's out for until whenever with this concussion, there's no timetable on it. It kind of takes away your clear out option. Josh Reynolds is not the same type of guy, although he was making some pretty nice catches last night. Maybe can have something there on the outside. And then, no Robert Woods. It just makes it really easy to key in on really 2 guys in this offense. Todd Gurley, harder to take away a running back unless you want to just stack the box on it, which they didn't. And then Cooper Kupp, which is a little bit easier to take away in the middle of the field and at least hold down to short passes. So I think last night was just a little bit odd. very rare you see a quarterback throw 18 times in a game, especially one in this offense. So it was just game flowed differently. They didn't have a lot of possessions overall, and they ran the ball 32 times with their running backs. So I'll hold on to him. But I do think that no Cooks, and if there is no Woods moving forward for at least another week or two, depending on what this issue is, that definitely hurts Cup's upside. Hopefully by the fantasy playoffs, one or both of those guys will be back.
Well, it might actually be a decent spot to buy Cooper Kupp. Looking ahead at their schedule, it's not going to be a situation where they're going to have the ability just to run the ball so many times. Like against the Ravens, and these aren't like super easy matchups either. And this is how you can kind of sell it in your league if you do want to obtain them. So you get at home against Baltimore, at the Cardinals, at home against the Seahawks, at the Cowboys, at the 49ers to end the fantasy season. Now, normally you'd say, well, that's just not very good. And maybe it will turn out to be very, very poor. Some of these are some of the best pass rush teams and best pass defenses that you can actually face. The schedule is just not great overall. But if people are just willing to give up on Cooper Kupp and then you tell them the schedule, maybe you can pry him away for like 60 cents on the dollar right now, just talking about how crappy Jared Goff is, how crappy the schedule is. He's put up to, I mean, last night wasn't horrendous as it comes to fantasy, but it's not what you expected from Cooper Kupp. Much better than the 0 that he put up before the bye week. But I'm just wondering what the actual market is for him right now, because I think almost any player is a buy or a sell, depending on where the price point is. And I feel like he would be undervalued right now.
Yeah, I think you can definitely get this guy for probably at least 80 cents on the dollar. So a pretty good trade for you. Yeah, I would go out and get him. Now, in the fantasy playoffs, there are some difficult matchups. He starts it off with Seattle, which is definitely a good matchup. So it could win you a week right there with Cooper Kupp. But then he gets Dallas, who's been very good in the slot, depending on who they're rotating through there, whether it's Jordan Lewis or if they're going to get somebody back, a couple of guys on injury for their cornerbacks. But Jordan Lewis has been very good in the slot. And then the 49ers in the championship. So some brutal spots in the playoffs, some good spots. It's just sort of you bet on talent at that point. But yeah, you're not giving up some of your best plays to get Kupp right now. If anything, you're giving up some tier 2 wide receivers to get to a tier 1 guy because he's had a rough 2 or 3 weeks this year.
Like if you had Michael Gallup right now, and you could offer some sort of package where you got Cooper Kupp, those were the two primaries, because Gallup has been amazing. Would you pull the trigger on that? Because I would rather have Cooper Kupp and what his potential upside is, but I don't think there's any real denying that Michael Gallup has been better over the past month.
Yeah, Michael Gallup's been really good. I honestly probably rather keep Michael Gallup there only because I think he gets the Eagles. He has a couple of nice matchups in the postseason, but it's also, if it's like one-on-one straight up, I'll take Cooper Kupp. It depends what the other piece is there. So yeah, if I'm somebody getting a deal and it's Michael Gallup and another nice piece for Kupp right now, I might actually take that deal. It just depends. Straight up, I wouldn't take it though. I'd prefer Kupp straight up.
There are 6 players at the moment inside, or at least with odds lower than 20-1 to be the NFL MVP right now. Which 6 players are those?
So Russell Wilson.
That's number 1. Oh, well, I mean, he's number 2. He is plus 160 to win MVP right now.
Lamar Jackson.
He's number 1, plus 150 to win MVP.
Aaron Rodgers.
Aaron Rodgers is 4th at 12-1.
Deshaun Watson.
Actually, he's tied with Aaron Rodgers. They're both tied for 3rd, 12-1. So those are the top 4. There's 2 others.
You said 2 others. Christian McCaffrey still?
No, Christian McCaffrey has fallen to 28-1, despite the fact that he can put up 30 fantasy points without scoring a touchdown, which is kind of nice.
Yeah, very nice to get the 100-yard bonus late in that game. Let's go Patrick Mahomes.
Patrick Mahomes is tied for 5th at 16-1. There's one more guy.
Interesting. Is it name value Tom Brady?
Is not name value Tom Brady. He is 40-1. The answer is Dak Prescott at 16-1, who continues to have one of the sneaky best seasons no one has ever talked about.
Yeah, one of the sneaky best seasons. I mean, there's specific stats you could talk about, but he's been one of the more specific ones like DR. He's one of the leaders in a lot of these advanced stats and metrics that just pretty much show how efficient and effective that you are, especially in some of the more clutch times of the game. So, yeah, I was talking with this with one of my Cowboy friends last night, actually. There was like a recent ranking of Dak or 25 or under quarterbacks age-wise, 26 or under, and Dak Prescott didn't make like the top 7 list for some reason on ESPN. But yeah, Dak Prescott right now, in my opinion, probably having the best not talked about year at a quarterback so far.
Do you think that Lamar will end up winning MVP? I know, like, the weird thing is the MVP is not necessarily a skills award. It's not necessarily a stats award. It's a narrative award. So your team needs to be good. in order for you to win. And generally speaking, they like to veer off a little bit. Like, unless you have the Patrick Mahomes 50 touchdown season from a year ago, and the Chiefs were awesome, that also contributes to this, that he's going to win MVP. It was between him and Breeze last year, and very clearly it was going to be Patrick Mahomes, just based on the overall bulk of numbers that he had. Lamar is poised to be that guy again, but he's not going to have the passing numbers to stack up. But that's obviously made for, up on the ground, the fact that he's going to probably rush for... He could potentially, with a great December, get to double-digit touchdowns and over 1,200 yards rushing. Would just be insane. There's a reason that he's the favorite right now. But let's say Baltimore stumbles a little bit. They lose like 3 games from here on out. Probably not going to happen. Let's say that's the case. Then you have Russell Wilson, who's... The Seattle's good, but they're not going to win their division likely. The Niners probably still win that. I think that there is room for Patrick Mahomes, if the Chiefs go on a run here to end the year at 16-1, to potentially reclaim the spot despite having missed time.
Yeah, it's just so difficult because of how much he did miss. But yeah, if you're getting a long odds on him, I like Mahomes at the longer odds. I still like Aaron Rodgers because it seems like 2 or 3 weeks ago, if Rodgers just has 1 or 2 more hot weeks and he has a very potential MVP type moment coming up against the San Francisco 49ers this week, if he wins that sort of a game in a prime time, has a good game, and then a week later, he's right back up there shooting to the top. Seems like these MVP favorites are flip-flopping every week. I think it's a 2-horse race as of right now through 10 weeks between Russell Wilson and Lamar Jackson. I personally think it's Russell Wilson has been the more deserving player just on a consistency basis. But if you're telling me who, if the season ended today, I think the media would vote to be the winner just based around all the positivity around Lamar Jackson and just overwhelming media attention to him compared to Russell Wilson. I think it has to be Lamar Jackson. I mean, he's something we've never seen since probably Mike Vick, and even then he's been a little bit more dynamic in my opinion. So yeah, I think he probably wins it. I don't think he's definitely deserving of it. I don't think he's more deserving than Russell Wilson through 10 weeks though, but just so much media attention going to him, and that really goes a long way.
You could look at it too. Like, I don't think that Aaron Rodgers, even like, he would have to go like absolutely insane at the end of the season to win MVP. But where this is a narrative-driven award, a narrative could really set up well for him if Wilson or Jackson take a few blows along the way and their team ends up losing games. Like, it's very possible that the Packers run the table here if they can beat the Niners this week on Sunday Night Football. It just got flexed in, which is fantastic for us viewers. But if you go into San Francisco and win, then all of a sudden it's at home against the Redskins, at home against the Bears, at the Vikings, at the Lions, and there's a game at the Giants in there as well. So you beat the Niners, and then you come out against the Giants and Redskins, 2 games where you should put up like MVP type stats because those teams are horrible. Then all of a sudden, if Wilson or Jackson ends up losing a game, and this is just me trying to talk myself into potentially different scenarios. I don't necessarily think this is going to happen, but if I construct the narrative around Aaron Rodgers' MVP, he can get there because you have the Niners game. That's a big NFC win that propels you to the top of the NFC, or at least close to it. Then you get the Giants and Redskins, stat padding type games, which is definitely on the table. Bears, Vikings, Lions, 3 division games to end the year. You'll win the division. You can potentially knock the Vikings out of it. And the Lions and Bears just aren't very good right now. That I do see a path where he might be undeserving, but could still win potentially.
Yeah, I agree. And then we still don't even know what Matt Stafford's status is like for that final game in Detroit. If he's out, I mean, the Packers have just ran so hot with facing just terrible quarterbacks. Cam Newton obviously goes down. They get Kyle Allen that week, been down, but you don't get no Patrick Mahomes when they play the Chiefs. So they're really just running really good in terms of their schedule and the quarterbacks they're facing. So yeah, I think it's a real situation where if they win this week, I think their worst probably situation is 13-3 as a team. If they get by the 49ers, and their only potential loss to the Vikings on the road, where they've pretty handily played them over the past couple of seasons. So yeah, it's a spot that I think this is a really interesting spot for Aaron Rodgers because he wasn't doing anything all season long. And then he has 2 hot weeks that were propelled by really short passes to running backs. And he shot up to the favorite of the MVP as of 2 weeks ago. So I think it could flip on its head if, like you said, a loss comes for Baltimore, a loss comes, maybe Tyler Lockett goes out or he's going to miss more time and that hurts Russell Wilson. There's a path for Aaron Rodgers to at least be on a 14-2 team potentially as the quarterback of that with good stats and an MVP candidate for sure.
Yeah, it would probably hinge on them having the best record in the NFC, I would think.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Which they definitely could do if they beat San Francisco this week.
Yeah, exactly. I think the only potential loss is in Minnesota, and it really, at that point, potentially could be for the division. So I would put my money on Aaron Rodgers even on the road in that sort of a game against Kirk Cousins in a potential primetime game. Well, right now it's an 8:15 game on the 23rd. I don't know if that's a Sunday or Monday night game.
That is the Niners game is the Sunday night game this week.
No, yeah, the Vikings in week 16, they play at night on the road, and it's just a perfect spot in prime time for Kirk Cousins to maybe blow up again.
What was the date? The 23rd?
Yeah, that might be one of those weird Saturday games, but yeah, the 23rd.
That is Monday Night Football in week 16.
There you go.
All right.
Perfect. Yeah, Monday Night Football.
Running back injuries and pickups going into the week for your fantasy rosters. The guys most injured, Marlon Mack is the big one. He suffered a hand fracture. He's undergoing surgery. He's not going to play on Thursday. He may even miss multiple weeks after that. Jordan Howard didn't play with a stinger in his shoulder. He's questionable for week 12. James Conner got hurt again. Expect him to be out sometime. I would think we'll get reports on him later in the week. Devonta Freeman, no word yet if he's going to be back this week. Jordan Wilkins, which is really kind of key to the waiver wire pickups this week, dealt with an ankle injury, did not play against Jacksonville. Thus, Jonathan Williams was unleashed on the world once Marlon Mack went down. But that's going to be the key scenario to pay attention to, and we may not know the answer to as we go into waivers this week. Benny Snell, Chase Edmonds, Chris Thompson all missed the week as well. Mark Walton still suspended until week 14. So the actual pickups, I have Jonathan Williams at number 1 right now because it depends on Jordan Wilkins. I actually have Jordan Wilkins at number 8 just in case he plays. If Jordan Wilkins is active Thursday night against Houston, which is not the greatest of all matchups, mind you, but it does seem to be a situation where Jonathan Williams would start over Nyheim Hines as the primary ball handler, at least the guy getting the carries between the tackles. Now, that could completely flip if Houston jumps out to a lead in that game. All of a sudden, Nyheim Hines is on the field. Jonathan Williams is pretty useless. But Marlon Mack could miss some time here. Would you rather spend up on your fab and take Jonathan Williams or spend far less fab on Nyheim Hines, who you know is probably going to have, I'd say, floor 30% of the snaps against Houston with the potential of like 60% if they fall behind early, then he's just catching a lot of passes, or spend like 0 on Jordan Wilkins, just hope that he's healthy and all of a sudden he's the starter?
Yeah, I think honestly, out of all those, I'll just take Jordan Wilkins for 0 if he's healthy. And yeah, we're gonna have like the phantom injury reporting for today, Monday, for this Thursday night game, and then you have your waivers coming. So we probably don't know. But yeah, Jonathan Williams, if he does play, and you're going to have Jordan Williams active, I think they're just going to be splitting dead even the touches. I think Nyheim Hines at a minimum we'll see, even if the game is in a very run-heavy situation, 25-30% of the snaps. And then it's just really difficult to see Jonathan Williams being worth any sort of fab dollars or any sort of high priority in waivers. So the best you get out of Jonathan Williams is as a 60% snap guy if Jordan Wilkins or Jordan Wilkins is out this Thursday, 60-70% snap guy with only Hines behind him on Thursday night on a short week and a difficult matchup. So I just don't think the amount of money you have to spend on this guy is worth it. He also had 41% of his production on 1 carry, and he had 70% of his production on 3 of his carries. So a couple of big plays, 148-yard run. I think he's fine. I think he looked good. He's kind of been a journeyman back, but it's a situation where I don't think he's actually worth any potential hype that comes his way, or at least not a high priority on waivers.
Yo, here's something that's very, very interesting, and I probably should have done this before. I may have to adjust the waiver wire ranks here. Indianapolis, even if Marlon Mack misses a bunch of time, the next 4 weeks get 4 of the top 8 run defenses in football. At the Texans, at home against the Titans, at the Bucks, at the Saints. That's not good. Maybe Hines is the pickup.
Yeah, no, that's not good at all. Now, hearing that, I would probably want Hines more. And it depends. I think you can probably I think there'll be some hype around Hines. He played more snaps the past couple of weeks due to game flow. So you might actually have to pay a little bit more for him, but nothing and nowhere near as much as the guy who just ran for 100 yards in Jonathan Williams on limited touches with Mack out. So yeah, I think for this Thursday, if Wilkins is healthy, which I don't think on a short week he'll be fully there, I'd probably favor him to see like around 50% of the touches in a game that stays a little bit more neutral. But long term, now that you throw that schedule out there, Hines seems like, if you want any of these guys to be the guy, I don't know how much upside there is in general out of this 3-headed backfield now.
Well, this is sort of the thing. Despite the fact that there are guys to pick up if you need a plug and play off the waiver wire, hopefully you just have better running backs than this and it doesn't come down to it because none of these guys are projectable in any sort of way. So I'll re-up on the running back rankings. I had Jonathan Williams at number 1. I've moved him down now. So I have Bo Scarborough at number 1. We'll see how this turns out. Trey Edmonds at number 2. That's if James Conner is hurt and Jalen Samuels is already owned above the threshold. So he would be the next guy. Scarborough, Edmonds, Ballage, Hines, Geis, Williams, McKissick, Jordan Wilkins, Adrian Peterson, Raheem Mostert would be how I do it. Like, Ballage is playing all these snaps. He's just no good. What do you make of Bo Scarborough? Like, we had no real inkling that this was going to be the split that he would end up in. We know all season long that even except for the few weeks that Kerryon Johnson was getting like 81% of the snap share in the backfield. This Detroit thing has been so up in the air. Even looking back at yesterday, Scarborough 49%, Ty Johnson 29%, J.D. McKissick 23%, Bowden at 3%. Like, this is going to be like Patriots light, except not good at the same time. So I don't know how this ends up shaking out. Maybe Bo Scarborough's good. Maybe he's bad. I just don't know, unless I was in dire straits, if I'd pick up any of these guys.
Yeah, I don't think I want either. You touched on it. The 23+% snaps for 3 running backs this past week. We'll see what happens moving forward. It seems like maybe Ty Johnson gets a little healthier and sees more work. Scarborough would have had a second touchdown, got shoestring tackled kind of at the 1 yard line, so could have had an even better day. But yeah, he relied on a touchdown in that game. Wasn't really effective, although he led the team in snaps and carries with 14 for 55 yards in the score. It's not really a spot that I feel the need to get to him in a spot where I thought it was just really Kerryon Johnson not really being good behind this offensive line, but whoever they throw out there outside of the receiving game role for J.D. McKissick, nobody's done well. So maybe it's just an overall scheme thing, which is kind of head scratching when Matt Patricia wanted to be a run heavy team. So Scarborough, he's always a guy that I like to, if you can add him and not spend a high waiver, or you're later in your team's waivers this week or your league's waivers and you can get to him, use him as sort of a trade bait package type of a deal. You can do that, but he's not a guy that I feel confidence in spending like number 1 or even a top 5 waiver on.
I would think that Trey Edmonds would be the pickup if we knew that James Conner was going to miss this week. Samuel should have a pretty decent game against the Bengals because the Bengals give up all of the fantasy points to all of the running backs. But if Conner sits, Edmonds actually did play the most snaps Thursday night after James Conner ended up going out. Overall, it was Edmonds at 47%, Samuel's at 34%, Conner at 18%, then TBJ at 1%, so just kind of cross him out. Then maybe Benny Snell comes back, and that could throw a wrench into the situation. But if Conner and Snell are both inactive against Cincinnati this week, like Edmonds could be in line for 18 to 20 carries.
Yeah, he's the guy who, if you're going to plug and play this week, he stands out because also they're dealing with injuries to Deontay Johnson and Juju in the concussion protocol. So a team that already wants to run the ball is just going to be forced now to run the ball because you're running out there Johnny Holton, you're running out there James Washington, and then really nothing behind that. Ryan Switzer, maybe. So it's going to be a run-heavy approach no matter what, even more so emphasized this week for the Steelers due to some of these concussion issues for their wide receivers. And yeah, another fun fantasy fact for you, Trey Edmonds has an interception this year. So if you're somebody who has the very rare defensive scoring plus your running back, there's upside there as well.
If you were just like, I watched a lot of that Jets Washington game. I wouldn't recommend anyone go back and do that because it was not fun. But Wendell Smallwood played the most snaps at 46%. Geis played 29%. Adrian Peterson played 25%. It's not a great schedule coming up, but I was rather impressed with how Geis looked. He looked kind of explosive, and I think you're going to see this number grow and grow and grow. The issue is I don't know what the actual ceiling is on the amount of touches that he's going to get in a game. But I think on pure talent alone, and I wouldn't be alone in this, looking at the names on this list, he would be the guy. I just don't know what the role is going to be. I can see him usurping Adrian Peterson and extending his role a little bit. But if they're constantly playing behind, it does seem like that Wendell Smallwood, Chris Thompson role is going to play at least 40% of the snaps every single week. And if you're still divvying it up with Adrian Peterson, even if you have the larger share, it's now a larger share of 60% of the snaps, not 100% of the snaps in a bad offense, which would make you kind of useless.
Yeah, and like you said, it's just going to be a smaller overall workload of that share because this past week there was like 16 carries to go around between the two of them. And that's probably what you get normally. So flip it the other way. Maybe Geis gets 10 carries in a game, relies a little bit here and there on a catch or two, but he took a 35-yard short pass to the house, and he did look explosive. He got to the side pretty quick, beat defenders there, and just ran right by everybody as if some defenders were in slow motion. So at least moving forward for the team and the Redskins, that's good for them. But yeah, it's just 3 running backs. It doesn't seem like Chris Thompson has been practicing or will come back anytime soon. But I mean, if he is the upgrade to Wendell Smallwood in that role, so that doesn't help either. There's just no real positive coming for a Geis to break free, like you said. I think in most weeks, you're really happy if you get like 12 touches out of the guy. Now, there is always the upside that they're just completely out of it, and maybe Adrian Peterson just disappears, and you start to get 15 to 16 to 17 touches out of Geis, a catch here and there. Even though he's on a bad team, at least it's something worth noting on the waivers this week is probably a top 3 or 4 ad at running back.
Yeah, if you didn't need to play him this week, he'd be a fun pickup only because he goes Lions, Panthers, Packers, Eagles, Giants. That's 4 of 5 good matchups to end the season. And if they do make a concerted effort, being like, hey, we're playing Haskins at quarterback, we want him thrown to McLaurin, and we want to see what we have with Guys Peterson. You played well this year, you earned yourself another contract somewhere else, but we don't need you because we're going 1 in 15 kind of thing. That if Guys could propel himself up to the 15 to potentially 20 touches per game, we can see how he does in the receiving game. He does actually have some exploitable matchups coming up.
Yeah, I agree. And that one to start the fantasy playoffs against the Packers is the one that stands out the most to me. So, yeah, this is a spot where if you really don't have to spend much fab dollars or you don't have to spend a priority at all and he's just on your waivers, to go ahead and add him. A couple weeks back, I was sitting here saying that Peterson, so I feel like I'm just kind of going against myself. Peterson would be the guy I would want long term, but just seeing the way that Smallwood has stayed into this offense, you just need explosion out of these guys. And it was nice to see that. I was kind of skeptical on the health of Darius Guice 2 weeks ago when he was kind of coming off the IR, but seeing him on his touchdown, when I encourage people to go see it, he got to the edge faster than anybody out there, and he probably should as a running back, but there's a lot of questions around that knee and 3 surgeries on his knees. So it was good to see that there is some upside, at least in him on a per touch basis.
Wide receiver injuries from week 11. Emmanuel Sanders, Auden Tate, Robert Woods, who obviously didn't play. Not necessarily an injury, but he didn't play due to a personal matter. He's questionable for week 12. Sanders with the ribs. Tate got carted off of the field, so no word yet on his week 12 status. Philip Dorsett suffered a concussion, as did Juju Smith-Schuster, as did Deontay Johnson. It does look like Tyler Lockett, despite the fact that going into the bye week, that it looked like he was, had major leg surgery coming up. He could play this week, so he's not completely off the injury report at all, but it may not be as long-term as people think. Before the bye, Corey Davis had a hip injury. He missed the week. He could return this week in week 12. T.Y. Hilton may come back Thursday night. Probably not. Same as Paris Campbell. Alshon Jeffrey and Deshaun Jackson both didn't play for the Philadelphia Eagles. No Brennan Cooks. Adam Thielen with his hamstring problem goes into the bye week. He should be good coming out of it. Sterling Shepard returned to practice on Monday, but he has not cleared concussion protocol yet. His availability will hinge on passing the concussion protocol, and he would directly impact the upside of Darius Slayton on the Giants moving forward, playing on the outside. And then AJ Green. Do you think we see AJ Green again? Because I'm starting to think we don't.
No, I don't at all. Just the way seeing these Bengals play these games. I mean, they throw Ryan Finley out there when it should be Andy Dalton at this point. He's a much better quarterback, and that's been proven now for 2 weeks and even in the preseason. But also, they're just handing the ball off when they're trailing, and they just want to get out of there as quickly as possible, shorten the game. And if you're AJ Green, I don't know why the heck you would even want to come back. I'm very skeptical that he's, I don't want to say question the man's health, but fully injured. If this was a playoff push, he would probably be out there if I had to guess. So it just seems like a spot where I have a contract situation coming up. Why am I going to go try and re-injure my bum ankle again? So I don't think you see him yet again this year.
Week 12 waiver wire pickups at wide receiver. No changes at the top. Devontae Parker remains unowned for whatever reason. I don't quite understand, but he's been great.
Yeah, he's been good. And I want to see, I was trying to look today. They weren't out yet, some of the matchup data from this past weekend yesterday. I want to see how often Tre'Davious White was on him, because White's been shut down against everybody he's gone up against. And I would imagine there was a good amount of Tre'Davious White on Devontae Parker for that game. So there's a good chance that Devontae Parker was the first receiver this year to really have success against White. But we'll see probably by later today it'll be out.
So Devontae Parker, number 1, Darius Slayton, number 2, and that will hinge on the Sterling Shepard injury. I want to see if he passes concussion protocol. Until he does, I'm going to assume he's not back. Will Fuller is going to be a game time decision for Thursday night after missing week 11 with the hamstring injury, but it's a nice matchup against Indianapolis. Debo, Josh Gordon, Randall Cobb, James Washington, Zach Pascal, Cole Beasley, and A.J. Brown are the top 10. Debo's interesting against Green Bay. It's a pretty nice matchup, but I think a lot of it actually has to do with what if Kittle and Sanders are back. Then how good does Debo look? I'm not convinced that it's all that great.
Yeah, I wasn't convinced this past weekend either. I know Kittle was out and Sanders was banged up, but they were 12.5-point favorites, and then they just end up getting behind by multiple scores early. So it's another 40-plus attempt game for Jimmy G, and that just props up all the receivers, and you're de facto number 1 with an injured Sanders. So another week to get healthier for Sanders. He should be good to go. We'll see if Kittle, and this is the biggest matchup of the year, probably even more so than the Seahawks game. This is for, I would imagine, the number 1 overall seed at the end of the season here, for between the Packers and the 49ers at home in a primetime game. I think Kittle will probably suit up, which, it makes Debo then probably at best the third option in this receiving core. You'll get probably Matt Breida back, another body to catch passes. So it's not a high as a priority as it probably seems. I think he'll probably be overspent and kind of over-owned and overhyped in some fab dollars and even number 1 priorities. But he's been in 2 very odd spots where they've been favorites, and then Jimmy G's forced to throw 45 times. More times than not, Jimmy G will throw 30, 32 times, and he'll be the third option. So it's just back to probably a 5 or 6 target game, as you saw for the first 8 weeks of the season for Debo moving forward and where it matters most in the fantasy playoffs.
The more interesting pickup may actually be James Washington, because if you are in a world where there's no James Conner, no Benny Snell, no Juju, and no Deontay Thompson, you're going to have a lot of market share against the Bengals, which is always a good thing.
Yep. Yeah. I have James Washington right now as number 4, and I'm just projecting one of those guys between Deontay Johnson and Juju to be out. We've already seen the connection on just about half the snaps with his former quarterback, Mason Rudolph, coming through. He had a career game 2 weeks ago with Deontay Johnson and Juju out there. If I had to guess, one of them misses if both are in the concussion protocol. So that's just going to help Juju this week. And we'll see how this impacts the long term for both of these guys. If anything gets complicated here, you could potentially have James Washington being a viable option going into the fantasy playoffs. I have him behind guys like Devontae Parker, Fuller, and Slayton, like you mentioned.
Week 12, waiver wire pickups at tight end. There's a bunch of injuries to consider right now at the position and just making it super duper duper thin. But we have David Njoku, who is eligible to return this week off injured reserve with a wrist injury. No word yet on if he will or not, but that's something to keep an eye on. Josh Hill suffered a concussion yesterday, so he may not play this week for the Saints. Josh Oliver broke some bones in his back. His season might be over for the Jags. George Kittle obviously didn't play. Evan Ingram didn't play. I think he has shed his walking boot right now, but I don't know if he will return or not this week for the Giants. Rhett Ellison was also in concussion protocol before the bye week, and we've seen Sterling Shepard miss all these weeks for the Giants. Rhett Ellison could continue to be out as well. Austin Hooper didn't play. Ed Dixon could return for the Seahawks, which would throw a wrench into the Jacob Hollister love. Trey Burton was placed on IR. Delaney Walker could come back this week for the Titans, and Vernon Davis has just been out forever with this concussion problem. I doubt we're going to end up seeing him again for the rest of the year. But I guess the big one is once Chris Herndon went down for the season with his hamstring problem, whatever new injuries that he suffered, Ryan Griffin's kind of like the guy for the Jets. They have a very good schedule. He could be a top 10 tight end the rest of the year. He's my number 1 guy at tight end.
Yeah, he's my number 1 as well. Caught 5 balls for 109 yards and a touchdown on 5 targets. There's not really been much volume. He's had 2 of his biggest games. The other game, he caught 2 touchdowns on 4 targets. So not a lot of volume, just kind of getting lucky with some of these bigger plays and touchdowns. But that being said, if he's on your waiver wire, he's going to be a number 1 tight end, probably top 12 to finish out the year if you're going to get no Herndon, which it seems like. And also he's just, even though he's only seeing 4 or 5 targets, those are high upside targets, especially around the red zone where there's just nothing on your waivers at tight end. So he's the number 1 guy I have right now. I have Hollister highlighted with the caveat of Ed Dixon next to him. Still like the way they're using him. I have David Njoku. He's eligible to return. We'll see if he practices. You touched on that. I think that's a big one to monitor moving forward. And then if Noah Fant, 10 targets last week, I would say that people, you can see it as maybe it's a Brandon Allen thing with Noah Fant and this target share and the snaps he's playing. But I'd also keep an eye closely on Jeff Heuerman, who's a backup tight end, usually plays about 50% of the snaps, but he's also been out during the exact same amount of time since Brandon Allen took over. So that could be swaying it, and I imagine that is a little bit. So I do like Font, but I think it's a little bit inflated. If you get Heuerman back, you probably don't get as many snaps out of him.
You may or may not. The loss of Emmanuel Sanders is directly correlated with a larger market share for Noah Fant as well. Just running those seam routes for the Broncos and them actually having a guy that can get him the ball, that really does help. And he's not dropping every single pass that comes his way either, which is a huge boost to his actual fantasy value. So Griffin, Fant, Fells. I still have Dwelly above Hollister in the off chance that Kittle doesn't play or he's ruled out again. Then all of a sudden, I want to play Dwelly. They're using him as the red zone target in San Francisco.
Yeah, exactly. I agree with that too. He's a guy who's getting a ton of red zone targets, and he's running the same routes that Kittle was running. So maybe you get another week or 2 out of him here. So I think he's definitely deserving of a waiver pickup if it's maybe just your waivers have passed and he's on the wire still. He's a nice guy to add there. I guess we'll see tomorrow what happens here. But in a 20-team league, I guess I'll share that yesterday, after the news that Rob Gronkowski is going to make a big announcement on Tuesday, in my 20-man league, I added Rob Gronkowski. So is there any deep love interest for Rob Gronkowski?
I guess so, and maybe you're not going to know what it is. But let's say Gronk does come back, which I don't think that he's going to do. It's probably like some new CBD oil company that he's starting, or he's getting his own talk show every single day. I have no idea what it is. But let's say that he says he's coming back. Do you think that we even see him before the playoffs?
Yeah, that's the thing. It's a situation where they might even just save him for the real playoffs, not the fantasy playoffs at all. And there's also a case to be made that he might just be more of a blocker for this team that is not relying on their passing game at all. So it's really just a question mark around And yeah, if this was a 12 or 10 man league, I'm probably not picking him up. It was a 20-man league, so it was worthwhile at that point with the question marks around it. But yeah, I don't know. I think that's a good question. I think he wouldn't play for at least a week or two, and that's when the fantasy playoffs start. So it's kind of throwing it up there. If you have the room for it in a deeper league, it might be worth it. I think that at the end of the day, it's probably going to be something like he's going to be a tight ends coach or something for the Patriots.
Quarterbacks, you might have some struggles at quarterback this week. Mahomes is on bye, Rivers is on bye, Cousins is on bye, and Kyler Murray is on bye. I mean, there's a chance that all four of those players, probably not Rivers, but three of them at least, were being started in your league, or at least they should have been. They're all top 10 quarterbacks. And then you got some injuries to deal with, too. Stafford's not going to be back. Deshaun Watson's dealing with a bum ankle. We'll see what his status is. Bruce Arians says that Jameis Winston's ankle is okay and that he'll play this week. I guess that's good news. And Mitch Trubisky has a hip problem, not a I suck problem, but a hip problem. And we're probably going to see Chase Daniel this week for the Bears. But I do think that there is an answer on the waiver wire. Two of them, if you want to pick them up and you got some guts. I turned to my guy, Jeff Driscoll, last week against Dallas, and he's great. And now he gets Washington this week. Like 50 yards rushing from him. I wouldn't expect that every single week, but he's going to run the ball when everything else breaks down. And this is a much better matchup for him. I like Jeff Driscoll. I like Derek Carr at the Jets. And even, listen, I know I give low energy Sam Darnold a lot of heat. He's not a terrible option against Oakland, but you could have Brissett, Foles, Kyle Allen, Baker Mayfield, Darnold, but Driscoll and Carr really stand out to me as the top two options here.
Yeah, I have Driscoll 1, 2 Carr, and then 3 Sam Darnold right now for me. Yeah, Driscoll last week, 27 fantasy points, at least DraftKings scoring wise, which should correlate to most leagues. 27 fantasy points was a really nice performance, and you touched on it. He has the mobility on the ground. He kept a lot of drives alive, and especially the one where he scores a touchdown, ends up scoring on that, had a nice run on that drive. So he's a guy who, if you get any mobility out of a quarterback, it's upside against a weak pass rush in Washington. So it's a good matchup there. I might, as the week goes on, prefer Darnold a little bit more just for stability, but those three guys on a week where a lot of top quarterbacks are out makes some sense.
Yeah, Darnold beat up on Washington. Let's not go crazy, all right? On the Sam Darnold love. He still threw an awful interception. They generated no pressure. If Oakland just generates a modicum of pressure, all of a sudden Sam Darnold's a completely different quarterback.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think, though, the thoughts behind Oakland getting pressure is the big question mark there, if they will get some pressure, and just still a weak secondary there in all departments. But I think that's fair. I think he's still probably a top 3 option here. And yeah, the interception by Sam Darnold, I have it written. I don't think I've ever seen a worse interception throw. I think that's the third time I've said that about Sam Darnold this season alone.
Yeah, I guess the one good thing is, like, I thought that Jameis was really going to give us a gift. Because when Jameis throws some picks, especially at the end of the game, it's like, oh no, it's 4th down. Jameis isn't going to get the ball back to score more fantasy points. But then he threw a pick 6 and just got the ball back. So, it's -1, but then he gets the ball back to score more fantasy points. I need Sam Darnold to do more of that, I guess.
Yeah, I agree. I think the other thing in the Jameis game, I think one of his picks was just flat-footed directly to a defender with nobody around him, pick 6. But yeah, I agree is that you have the upside, at least from getting a ball back from a guy like Jameis Winston with the weapons that he has is a lot better than the Darnold. But if we get that out of him and we get maybe some more Robbie Anderson separation in this matchup, it could be a nice spot for him.
One of my props from yesterday, 3-2 day for props. The big one was the Driscoll over 18.5 or 17.5 rushing yards. He ends up with 50, so that was a nice one. The big bet of the day. But Demaryius Thomas has hit his receiving over in 6 to 7 games now.
Yeah, Demaryius Thomas has been kind of the guy who's been hidden in this offense, but he always ends up getting the best matchup because you have the priority of Robbie Anderson on the outside for most teams. We've seen Demaryius Thomas against the Giants, got DeAndre Baker, who's so far still the worst cornerback in the league. He always just gets the worst cornerback on a team, and when he's going to be in a good matchup, it gets even better because it's one of the worst cornerbacks in the league then. So yeah, I think that Demaryius Thomas is a guy who a couple weeks now in some of my content I've said is a sneaky type of a start and like a very, very low-end tournament play if he gets in the end zone. So he's a guy who continues to be undervalued, and he still is not getting separation. But when you're facing guys who are barely in the NFL at the cornerback position in some of these matchups, you're probably going to win if you're Demaryius Thomas more times than not.
Let's shift over to the defensive streams for the week. And number 1 in my rankings right now is going to be Denver at Buffalo. And it all really depends on if the Broncos can jump out to a lead here, because all of a sudden when you get Josh Allen playing from behind, that could be turnover city. And the defense has just started to look very, very strong over the past few weeks. And they're widely available. The Falcons at home against the Bucs with renewed pressure to get on the quarterback. Whoa. Just sounds fantastic against Jameis Winston. Lions at Washington, Browns at home against Miami, Giants at Chicago. No offensive line. Trubisky not starting would hurt this a little bit. The Giants still have been able to ratchet up some pressure. Then both Thursday night teams, Texans and Colts. Thursday night's just weird that just randomly taking a defense from one of those games could turn out really well, like the Browns last week against the Steelers. So I always usually lean the home team there, but both those defenses are all right. But I think that Denver, Atlanta are the two you want to focus on.
Yeah, I agree. And Atlanta moving forward for next week in DraftKings, I haven't looked at the price, but I imagine they're still relatively cheaply priced. And yeah, if they're going to get more pressure and face a interception prone for more last week in Jameis Winston, quarterback with pick six upside as always. Yeah, I like that spot for Atlanta. I'll echo for this fantasy playoff type of stuff for streamers is that Pittsburgh, again, if they're somehow available this week against Cincinnati is fantastic. And always look at the teams that are dropping some of the defenses that are on bye. Last week, we already talked about the Packers. They were on bye last week. I imagine a lot of people just, you don't need to roster two defenses, drop the Packers defense. But moving forward, they're one of the better defenses to own. Maybe not this upcoming week against the 49ers, albeit not a terrible spot with their pass rush, but into the fantasy playoffs, it's a nice spot to have.
Let's switch over to Monday Night Football. The Chiefs at the Chargers in Mexico City at high elevation. The spread opened at 3.5. It is now +5 for the home team, Chargers. The Chiefs are 5-point favorites on a neutral site field, which would make them probably around 8-point favorites although the Chargers generally play on neutral site fields, even at their home games, so maybe it's not that big of a difference. But at elevation, the over-under has actually dropped since the beginning of the show over the past hour from 53 to 52.5. The money flooding in on the Chiefs. However, Phillip Rivers as a 3.5-point or more underdog in his career. I got to pull up Feinberg here. You know, if there's a Phillip Rivers stat to be had, Feinberg has it. Let's see. What was it? Phillip Rivers, 27-12 against the spread while getting more than 3.5 points in his career. Do you like the Chargers here? Because I picked the Chiefs on the pick show, but I think that at 5, this just becomes a no bet for me.
Yeah, I actually like the Chargers and the points, and I'm close to wanting to put a money line bet on the Chargers here. More of a neutral, obviously it is a neutral field situation, but I'll actually not even a lean. I'll take the Chargers +5, and I even lean to try and get to the money line for a little bit more of the money. Plus, I imagine like +250 is probably what the money line looks like. I was seeing earlier.
Yeah, plus I believe it's now +2. It's +250 or +260. Props from the game. Is there any one player in particular that you think you want to target here? Like, we don't know what the status of LaShawn McCoy is going to be yet, but Damian Williams had not traveled with the team because of a personal matter. He's down there now, so he is going to start for the Chiefs. Just looking at some of his numbers, like 22.5 receiving yards, I think is a very interesting number for him. Rushing attempts for him, they won't even put him on the board because they don't know if Shady's going to play or not because you can't price that too high or too low. I guess in the receiving game you can do that. I kind of do like the 22.5 receiving yards, though.
Yeah, I like that. It all depends on McCoy here. If he's out, you saw a 24-3 touch split with him, Damian Williams and Darrell Williams. The last time that McCoy was a healthy scratch to try and, they said, preserve him for the postseason. So there's a good chance you might not get him once again, although this is a pretty important game. So he should suit up. I saw in one spot a 50.5 rushing yards for Damian Williams, and then it came off. So if that's something that they're going to give us with or without, if it's without LaShawn McCoy and that stays the same, then I would definitely take that. That's an interesting spot. I'm seeing here on one of the books that I'm looking at, you have Keenan Allen at 68.5 receiving yards and 5.5 receptions. I actually like the over. I lean the over on both of those, but I like the 5.5 receptions as an over. He's going to probably get a backup cornerback here with Kendall Fuller being injured, and he's going to be a game time decision. So if you get that for Keenan Allen, in a really nice spot against the Chiefs in the middle of the field where they've been susceptible, he'll get Rashawn Fenton, who's filling in at slot cornerback. I'll just take my chances there with a guy who has now been 3 weeks removed from this injury, and it's kind of been underreported on. He was kind of hobbled for 2 or 3 weeks there with an injury. Seems to be fully healthy now against a backup cornerback. I think this is just in general fantasy DFS, if it's fantasy or real life for betting. I think this is a huge Keenan Allen spot, so I like both of those props, the over for him.
How about 4.5 total sacks in this game?
From both sides total?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I like that one. I mean, you still have injuries on both offensive lines. I think Okun is still questionable / probably doubtful for this game. So yeah, I like both I like both of that. Both offensive lines are a little bit hollowed up. The defensive line for the Chiefs is still banged up, but they got Chris Jones back a few weeks ago, so that definitely helps with generating pressure. And you still have Bosa, who's been dominating the last 2 or 3 games for the Chargers. So, yeah, 4.5 total sacks, that sounds pretty good in a game where I'd imagine there's going to be a lot of pass attempts, at least somewhere around the 70 range in pass attempts.
Well, as it pertains to DraftKings, then, it sounds like you want to build around Keenan Allen. He's $8,400 overall. You juice him up to be a captain. It pushes him over $10,000. But is that the route you think you'll go?
Yeah, right now I really like Keenan Allen, and the price tag is just really nice. He's been very mediocre to bad, but again, there was 2 or 3 weeks where he was playing limited, and even if he wasn't playing limited snaps, he was just dealing with an injury. He came out a couple of times, but he said now since the bye week that he feels healthy. So this is a spot where I just like the overall matchup and the skill set for a price down wide receiver in Keenan Allen. It's interesting. The entire offense, really, all the weapons for the Chargers on this slate, you have $8,800 Phillip Rivers, $86 Gordon, $84 Keenan Allen, and then $82 Hunter Henry. So they're all priced right next to each other. I kind of like Keenan Allen over all those guys at similar price ranges.
If there's a cheap player that you would consider going with in your showdown contest, who do you think it would be?
Yeah, so I'll go all the way to the bottom. $200 Andre Patton. I should also point out $500,000 on the showdown slate for DraftKings tonight. I don't know if it's a promotion because of this situation or the stadium that they're going to be playing in, but interesting. It's $11 buy-in, so maybe that helps a little more expensive. But yeah, so $200 Andre Patton. Am I convicted by it? No, but I think he'll still be low owned. He's averaging 23.3 routes run per week over the last month. The only downside is he has 0 catches. So he's seeing like a target a week. But if you're out there for 24 routes run, and he's always like the 4th or 5th option in this offense, don't get me wrong, he's $200, but he's nowhere near the normal $200 player on a showdown slate because he's actually running routes. You're betting on a touchdown here, but if you're trying to win $500,000 by yourself, this seems like a route where 23 routes run will lead to a touchdown more times than the 5 routes run you're going to get out of these other $200 players. So there's not a lot of really cheap players that stand out to me, and I'd rather just punt all the way down and get some shares of Patton.
So it sounds to me like you're willing to do a Chargers 4-player, Chiefs 2-player build. And I guess if you're playing fewer lineups in one of these giant showdown contests, that's probably the way to play it, as I figure that'll be the more contrarian avenue.
Yeah, definitely. I do like that route. And you have a lot of priced up guys for the Chiefs. I mean, you have Mahomes, the highest price at $12,000. And then you have Tyreek and Kelsey. The main options here are all priced up. I want a lot of Tyreek on this slate. A lot of people might think he's going to be guarded by Casey Hayward. First of all, Tyreek Hill doesn't get shadowed because you really just can't shadow him. But Hayward is probably not going to be on Tyreek for most of this game. I imagine you get Casey Hayward lining up against Demarcus Robinson for the majority of this one. So that just helps Tyreek Hill even more. Even if it was Hayward for 40-50% of the game, it doesn't worry me all that much with Hill's skill set. So I really like Keenan Allen. I like Tyreek Hill. Don't have much confidence behind Andre Patton, but if he's going to see 2 or 3 targets at $200, you just have to pray that he finds the end zone.
Sal Vetri. You can follow him on Twitter at Sal Vetri DFS. Let everyone know what you got going on this week and where to find your content.
Yep, you can find my content on my YouTube channel. It's just my name, Sal Vetri. You can subscribe there, as well as a podcast that I just stripped that audio, and it's the same type of content if it's easier for you on a podcast, the Sal Vetri Show. NBA breakdowns every single morning on the NBA slates, and then NFL content comes out 5 to 6 days a week. There is a Monday Night Football Showdown for today.
All right. You can follow me at the PME, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook if you want to get into a draw for $20 DK. What you do is smash the like button for the episode, leave your DraftKings handle in the comment section. Tell me your favorite pickup defense for the fantasy playoffs, weeks 14 through 16. You'll be in that draw for $20 DK, as you will if you subscribe to the Pat Mayo Experience audio podcast. Leave a 5-star review, DraftKings handle, something you like about the show. It takes like 30 seconds to do, and you can win $20 DK. I suggest you go do that right now. Other than that, you can find all of the snaps, all of the entries, all of my updated pickups as these things change throughout the week, or at least until waivers happen, up on DKPlaybook.com, and you can find the links in the description of this video and podcast. The Pat Mayo Experience open on DraftKings, $15 to play. The link will appear in the description once it is available. It hasn't been available yet, but I will add it in. And 2:15 p.m. Eastern Time, Tuesday, if you got trade questions for your trade deadline, I'll be live with Jake Seeley on the DraftKings YouTube channel starting then, and we'll be taking your questions towards the end of the show if you got them, so tune in then. I'm Pat Mayo. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you next time.